So how much is a human life worth? This is something that's being debated right now. Like, how could you possibly choose to open the economy and lose so many lives? You can't put a price tag on that. Well, hate to break it to you, but the US government has, and they have been doing so for nearly 4 decades. And I'm going to show you exactly what that number is. Now, in 1982, there was a requirement where OSHA was petitioning all employers to have to label things that are flammable or hazardous materials when their employees are using it. Don't smoke next to this. Don't touch this. It's going to burn your hand. Believe it or not, that wasn't required just in 1982, the year I was born. So OSHA did a study and sent it up to the federal government and said, hey, you guys need to require this. And they said, well, how many lives is it going to save? And the answer was about 4,700 lives. Okay, cool. It's going to save 4,700 lives. How much is it going to go ahead and cost us to do this? It's just really ink and paper. Well, they determined, and it was going to cost about $2.1 billion to go ahead and label everything and get everything done. So they said, okay, well, how can we justify this expense? We've got to justify it in the budget. So they said, okay, well, during wrongful death suits, right now that's being used is about $300,000 is the amount of lost wages based on the average worker, the wage they were making in 1982 and the average time they had left in work. So they said, okay, $300,000 times 4,700 people is going to give us roughly $1.5 billion. Well, government's like, well, too bad. You know what? It's going to cost us $2.1 billion, but you know what? It's only going to save what would be equivalent to about $1.5 billion. We can't justify that spend. Well, OSHA was like, this is crazy. There's no way that can be. And so they kept petitioning it, and it got on the desk of the first George Bush president. And he said, well, okay, let's get somebody else to look at this. And so what they ended up doing was they hired an economist who was a risk assessment from Vanderbilt University. And he said, guys, you guys are crazy. You cannot put a value on somebody's life at just their lost wages. There's an intrinsic value. Nobody is going to, in their right mind, say, hey, kill me, but give my family $300,000. No, they want to live life. So they thought about how can they figure out that number. And they said, okay, you know what? The best way we can figure that out is people have a choice. And what do they choose to do based on the risk that it poses to them? And what do they make that choice freely? Their jobs, right? If the more dangerous your job is, typically the more your employer has to pay you to do that job. So they did an analysis. They said, hey, a movie ticket clicker at a movie theater, what they make compared to what the entry-level position in a construction worker makes, let's look at what that difference in pay is per year, because a movie ticker has a 0% chance of dying on the job, and a contract of a time had a 1 in 10,000 chance. So they said, okay, in 1982, the average pay wage between those two was $300 a year. So they said, okay, that employer is going to incur approximately $3 million more in cost. $300 per person times 10,000 people that work, because 1 out of every 10,000 die in the construction industry. So that employer for 10,000 people is going to incur about $3 million more in wages. Okay? So they did this whole bid. They went in and said, look, you guys are wrong. The average life is worth about $3 million, because that's what a person is willing to put themselves in risk for, and that's what it turns out to be. They said, okay, we agree on that. That makes sense. So we took $3 million now and multiplied it by the 4,700, and what do you know? It's $15 billion. And in the past, 1983, OSHA goes ahead and puts labels on everything. And so that was the first time that the government really used a true numerical value on what every human being's life is worth here in the United States. And you're going to see that right here. So in 1982, we had $3 million per person. Well, time value of money based on today's requirements, and the government is still using this. This is how they make health and safety decisions. How much money, how many lives is this going to save by implementing this? Multiplied by the dollar per life they've given, what does that equal versus what is it going to cost? And they've been making that decisions all the time with safety belt beeps and backup cameras and all the things that get passed federally as safety issues. So what they did was to determine when should we open the economy or should we really shut down the economy, they use this exact same formula for COVID. So we know that right now your life is worth $10 million according to the US government, right? Some of you are stoked and being like, dude, that's way more than half. Other people are like, what? I wouldn't take $10 million to die tomorrow, right? But that's the number. They have. So don't think they haven't put a number on your life. They have. Now, they figured out when they were making the decision to shut down the economy or not, how many lives are going to be potentially lost if we do nothing. If we let this just run rampant and we do nothing, how many people? And the biggest estimates that they ended up using, and the one they decided on using was about 1 million people, okay? Roughly 1 million people would die in the United States of COVID-related illnesses, worst case scenario. So they said, okay, cost of life at $10 million a life at 1 million people is $10 trillion. $10 trillion would be the life lost. But it can't just be lives lost because you have this massive influx on the healthcare system that they have to. You have all these, if 1 million people die, you're going to have way more than that many getting sick and weighing in on the healthcare system. So they said, okay, healthcare costs is about another $8 trillion. So if we do nothing, it's going to cost us $18 trillion in damages. If we do nothing. Okay, well, if we shut down the economy, the US economy generates $20 trillion a year. That's our GDP per year, $20 trillion. So if we shut down our business, aka the US economy, and we shut it down for 2 months, well, 2 months, approximately, we can kind of see is roughly, rounding it up, is going to be roughly in the ballpark range of about $4 trillion, give or take. That's the number they use. Somewhere between, in that estimate, somewhere between the range of 60 days to 90 days kind of a shutdown. They use $4 trillion, right? Everything shuts down $4 trillion. Then we're going to have to help people out by $6 trillion, right? In stimulus. We all saw the bills that passed, okay? Well, $4 trillion, $6 trillion equals $10 trillion. So $6 trillion in stimulus, $4 trillion in shutting down the economy, $10 trillion. It's going to cost us to shut down this economy. Well, you know what? 10 trillion is a hell of a lot less than $18 trillion. So we're shutting down the damn economy. So this is how they made that mathematical determination. And how they're going to determine whether they're going to open it or not is when this changes. When the loss of lives and the loss of healthcare now drops down, we're going to see us reopen the economy. So that is what your life is worth.